Hi, welcome to the Bard Graduate Center. BGC is a research institution dedicated to the exploration of human history through the study of objects. This building houses our library, our study collection, classrooms, all that serve our graduate students and faculty. And a couple of buildings just down the road is our gallery space where we showcase exhibitions each semester, and our latest exhibition will be opening February 23rd, Sonia Delaney's Living Art, so mark your calendars. Every Wednesday evening we gather here for programs like tonight, and I am just so excited for this particular lecture. This I'll get to it in a second. First, my name is Abby Lynn Kazarian Myers. I am a first year master's student here at BGC. I'm a glass maker by trade. I've been training and working in the field for several years before coming to BGC, making a lot of objects that were not initially glass out of glass. So exploring my Armenian heritage by making ancient Armenian objects in glass. I came here to learn a bit more about why I'm doing that as a research practice, more about my source material, what I'm trying to get at there. And this has been the perfect place for the semester and the quarter that I've been here. Tonight, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Daniel Clayman to the BGC community. As our Paul and Irene Hollister lecture in glass, Dan is the perfect example of interactions with material culture as we study it here at BGC in terms of objects. Glass is one of the most incredible mediums I've ever worked with, and I owe everything that I know basically to Dan in a lot of ways. So I'm really pleased to introduce this community here to Dan. He's known for his technical expertise, his use of light in installation, and the sheer scale of his work in this material is just so difficult to accomplish, and he makes it look easy. So without further ado, here's Dan Clayman.
Full disclosure, Abby is the daughter of my doctor. And I've known Abby since she was 4. At school dances, father-daughter dances. I'm going to take off my coat. Okay. So, first of all, thank you for having me here. And is Professor Itai, is he here? Well, anyway, I sat in on a class on the occult and magic yesterday, and it was that 2.5-hour class. I won't ever look at the magic of what we do different, the same. It really changed my whole perception of what can be magic. And I thought we were going to a class about tricks, and that's not what we were doing. So let's move. I'm going to put my timer on. Okay. So a few important terms for those of you who don't know about glass. Who here knows about glass here? All right, so I'm going to give you a little primer. Glass, what makes up glass? Sand is the biggest thing. And then we add flux, which is usually soda. We change its hardness and its chemical stability with lime. We debubble it with something called manganese. We use a clarifier, lots of different things, but Steuben, that old really bright glass, that's because of the lead content. And if you think about it, Steuben glass as an optical glass is 45% lead. That's a lot of red powder, orange powder in the batch room. And then colorants. So easiest color to make is blue. You would use cobalt. The hot shop, glass is manipulated at 2300 degrees. In the warm shop, we do kiln processes from 12 to 1600, around. Cold shop, 72 degrees. Why is it the cold shop? It's where we're doing everything cold to the glass. Think about a wood shop. You can do anything to glass that you can do to wood. You just change your tool setup. So glass requires carbide, diamonds, and water to cut. Kiln casting is using plaster-based investment molds that you put into kilns to cast glass into. And two very important words are vitreous and devitrified. Vitreous means it's a material that has the tendency to flow and look glass-like. And devitrified happens a lot, and we're going to see it a couple times. Devitrified means through chemical intrusion, usually organic material, or a hold in temperature at a weird time, you can get the glass to devitrify. We like it in some ways because it looks great, although not perfect, but we also hate it because it cracks. So it's a perfect example of devitrification, and it happened because I melted that section 3 times. And at some point there was a phase change in the material. This is the piece I'm giving to the Bard Study Collection. I just put it in here. It's a reject. Look at this. The laser didn't work, and I'm not touching the screen. So this is perfect. 3 sides are perfect. The reason Bard's getting it is this side has a big dent, and it's unacceptable to the world. So it's going to be a good, the reason I like it for Bard's study is you can touch it. If it breaks, it's not a problem. It's just something to have. And this piece, 18 inches tall. And this is just one piece. We're going to talk about it later, but I just wanted to give an intro when Abby talked about scale. So here, I love this because this is looking at the piece. This is looking through the piece. So we'll talk about that. And this was another part of that show, a piece called 3 Volumes. We'll talk about that too. And new objects on the theme of respiration and constriction. Could it be COVID related? You know, I'm serious. I don't know if that's where it came, but I'm working on forms that go. So, and we'll talk about these. So, and now I'm just going to run us through. Did Dan Clayman arrive on Earth and just go, oh, glass? There's years behind. I fell into the contemporary glass movement in 1981. So I'm just going to quickly give you, as knowledge of glass spread, techniques and products ever evolving, there was a time under the pharaohs of Egypt, and that should be plural pharaohs, not apostrophe, when glass was more valuable than gold. So here we go. Here's about 3000 BC, and we're just going to whip through this. It is generally agreed that glass was discovered in the Mideast somewhere. And everybody kind of argues over who did it, who found it. But what I think happened was somebody's there in the desert having dinner, little sheep something or whatever, and all of a sudden a lightning strike hits, and they walk over there and they go, hey, Mordecai, this looks like something called glass. So that's generally accepted how glass was discovered, although Mordecai, we don't know. There you go. Yeah. Or call Reiner the 2,000-year-old man, I kind of footnote. So it immediately traveled towards Persia, and then watch this explosion over, 3,000, 4,000 years. It gets to Rome, and it goes north into England and Scandinavia. So here's a excavated in Palestine, 4000 BC. So probably that is a lightning strike where the glass has fused to the rock. And barely 2,000 years later, they were casting glass. This is a kiln cast, you know, kind of a wood fire, coal or something. And it's got different layers, and it's a pretty good resolution of kiln cast glass. Israelis blowing glass, and you can see, remember I said lime content as a stabilizer? This probably didn't have much lime in it because that outside is spalling. It's called sick glass. And then look at that, not very far forward, we have the Romans. Look at this, look at the progress in the technique. It's really wild. And then we have the cage cup. Those of you who may not know this started out as solid. And then it was ground with engraving tools. Well, what's an engraving tool in 4th century AD? A rock harder than the glass. And they figured out how to turn it, so it works. On your right, I just put a piece of Carla Trinkley's from 1994 because it just visually connects with what we're looking at. The Portland vase, very important. 2 layers of glass, cameo cut. They thought it was blown until the last 5-6 years ago. There's been some electron spectrographic analysis. If it was blown, the bubbles would likely be roundish or horizontal as they turn. But they saw that the glass bubbles were like this, which leads them, the academics, to believe that maybe it was cast. And those bubbles elongate as the glass falls in the mold. So we don't know. I don't know how back then, though, they would have gotten 2 layers of color. So, but it's an argument, an ongoing argument. And then there's this figure. So artists have been looking at the figure forever. 2nd century AD. Islamic mold blown glass. This was undoubtedly 2 layers of color gathered out of 2 furnaces and then carved back. This is totally has been reconstructed, but it's a pretty beautiful thing for that time. German. Everybody know why the Pronts are on there? Anybody? Greasy hands. And this, I couldn't find the source. I found the image a couple of years ago. The important thing is it is very much a Persian shape, but with Italian Marini decoration. So you see how it's all melding. A typical glass furnace of the 1500s in Europe. So go over to urban glass and you'll see a modern version of that. I love this slide, 1400, 1890, Dante Marioni, 2001. All the same techniques. And look how tight this is in 1400. Isn't that crazy? You travel north as it expands, and the Bohemian glass, Czech area, their big thing was enameling, painting, telling stories, but you can see the Italian influence of the folded foot. We're jumping now into the 1800s, 1900s. The American glass factories invented pressed glass. And the reason pressed glass was so popular is this is basically an engraving pattern. But you didn't have to pay somebody to engrave that over 6 weeks. You just press the mold and it comes out. Swedish pressed milk glass. We know this is not blown. My handy stick. Right here, see that vertical line? See that? That is a mold part line. So we know that, and we can tell that the lip probably was not cold worked. The glass went in, the right amount of glass went in, and then the thing went, and it squeezes the glass up to be into the mold to be that rigid, that zigzag. And a piece of Art Nouveau, circa 1900, but it shows us the hot pulling of the molten glass that was added afterwards. It was stuffed into a mold. It's been hit with stannous chloride, all of the kind of features of that time. And then Harvey Littleton's Vicor, it was a glass Corning was making, and Harvey's dad was part of the Corning Incorporated. And so I love the juxtaposition of 2,000, 3,000 years. Unstable glass, I think pretty stable glass. So then glass comes to America. The King of England sent a company to say the window glass is too expensive in Europe. The trade tariffs were just way too expensive. Sound familiar? Right? So he said, you guys go over and make a factory. So first, as we know, the first attempt in Jamestown failed due to disease and famine. But they kept at it. They sent another group. 1608, they started making glass in this glass house. And the furnace looked like this, and that's the gathering port. That's the fuel filling port, and where the pipes are is the gathering port. They did not have fancy blowpipes then. Probably just crappy iron pipe that they forged somehow. And their first stock in trade was not window glass, which would have been rondelles. Their first stock in trade were glass bottles, and each one of these seals would be a different merchant selling beer, whatever. So that wasn't to say where this was made. Each business had its seal. We traveled north to Cape Cod. Anybody wonder why? But why? Sand and wood, fuel. And you spread to the Ohio Valley for the same reason. And it just begins to go crazy. And in 1971, Dale and a lot of people, Jamie Carpenter, Kate Elliott, Toots, Zinski, bunch of people arrive on this farm up near Bellevue and started Pilchuck. So the top right is that first hot shop. That's the tent. And on the lower right is the iconic hot shop that's there now. So this was huge in the contemporary. The contemporary glass movement had started, but this is the thing that made America the center of summer glass, like worldwide center of summer glass. And Lino came in 79 and generously gave all the secrets up. I mean, I don't know if that's quite true, but was very generous to the point where he had some trouble at home, is the story. And Klaus Moye, this is another huge event. Klaus is in Austria, going back and forth to Pilchuck. But he gets an opportunity. He moves to Australia, to Canberra, and starts a glass program there, which blew up that side of the world to all the artists we know now that come from Australia. It's a very robust. And some of these circles are not just even my reading of glass history. I've had students from around the world over time. Look at that. Boom, boom. So in 1962, it all began in Toledo. This is the first group. Notice that there's women at the first group because glass became this macho, crazy thing for a while. Harvey Littleton was a ceramics professor at Wisconsin, and he said, why can everybody have a ceramics studio in their backyard, but you can't blow glass except in a factory? So the Toledo Museum of Art got a grant. Dominic was at the Libby Owens factory and agreed to come over and help them. And he was an artist type of guy too. So this is some of the work he made. And this is work like from the end of that first and second workshop. You can see totally rudimentary, lucky to get it off the blowpipe. This one cracks me up. And the first in the 60s, it was like you made this blob and somebody, oh my God, I want that. Kind of with no judgment of the content or excellence. It was really about this excitement of a material. And so we had a transfer from the factory, Dominic, over to Harvey, Dale, Tom Buechner. And here is Henry Halem blowing in a studio now. This is what a factory looked like. And what do we have? Oh, school studios. So these are old type of studios, and this is much more what you're likely to see now. So the equipment, you used to have to build your own equipment. Now you can call 1-800 Eddie Bernard, and with $65,000, you'll get a really spiff furnace with really good environmental, blah, blah, blah. Glass Art Society, really important in this whole thing, because the Glass Art Society is what got it together as a community. And Abby and I at the end are going to talk about community as a really important part of what this whole thing has become. Spreading the word, books, all sorts of things. And workshops happened. 1 year, Fritz gave 265 workshops. They were the Pied Pipers of the material. And Dick Marcus, first one to go to Fulbright go to Murano on a Fulbright. And so he came back with all these Italian techniques. Remember that was made from cane. And Dick's MFA thesis piece was the Lord's Prayer on a Marini. You had to look at it under a microscope. Of course, Dale had the personality to make this thing happen. We owe him a lot. You could say as an art historian that the reason ceramics didn't take off with the explosion that glass did was because they didn't have a Dale. No, seriously, it was his, and his crazy personality that was able to get this to happen. Lino, of course, we know. And then production studios cropped up everywhere. Josh Simpson, who I work for, his wife is an astronaut, and he made these little worlds, he called them. And I was on the production team that made these back in 1980 something. My job was to accept or reject these goblets every morning. Production studios of all types cropped up. All these Italian techniques. Corey Pemberton out in LA, I think. And Morgan Gilbreth. This is making these objects out of recycled glass. She doesn't throw anything away. Architectural interventions, Jamie Carpenter, we all know. And this is, for me, his best project, the Israel Museum. The entryway in makes you cry. This recreation pavilion, I love the, and then this is his schematic for the sky reflector at Fulton Center. This is the Palace of Congress, so it's Congress House in Montreal. I forget the architect, but the architect came up with this color scheme. And it's emulated by Spencer Finch, who did this piece at Corning 2020. Really interesting artist if you don't know his work. Design and designers, there's a whole other cadre of designers. This is my buddy Alison Berger. Her drawing style, her observations, and then some of her pieces. And then we're maturation and broadening. What happened in the 80s, 90s? Number one, bullseye glass. Klaus Moyer, these are the 4 panels at Corning. Klaus came to Dan and I think Lonnie was already on the scene. Came to Dan and Lonnie and said, I'm over here in Europe. I got like 12 colors I can work with that fuse together. How about making glass that's compatible? So they set about it. Took them 2 years, and now they have hundreds of colors of glass that work together. Here's the crazy thing. I have glass from Bullseye from 1990. It says tested compatible. I can mix it reliably with glass from 2022, 24, because they're so tight on their chemistry and observations. So these are a great color palette. You can fuse any one of these to each other and it won't crack. This is the Bullseye factory. So this is not like a studio, nothing even like Urban in terms, Urban's a pretty big studio. This is a factory. And a piece made from Bullseye glass. But Bullseye really opened up pot de verre. So for those non-glassies, pot de verre, paste of glass, you mix glass powder with some sort of binder and pack it into molds, and you get forms. So this is high-level pot de verre from the 1800s from Rousseau. What's amazing about it is that these colors are right where Rousseau wanted them to be. That's how we know it's pot de verre, because those colors were packed into the mold wall. And then the Higuchis, Shin and Kamake, they're the modern practitioners, the best modern practitioners of this, of that traditional. Look at that. And that is fully matured glass versus this Deborah Harrell. This whole look is done, this is probably just 50 or 60 degrees lower than what we saw with the Higuchis. And then this is Alicia Lomé, and all, you know, so this is just one color. There's great videos with Alicia where these lines are put in with little teeny brushes and little rubber tips, and it's really phenomenal what she's doing. How does stained glass fit in? Centuries of religious themes give way to, say, Tiffany for decorative themes, give way to Narcissus quagliata portraits, or Narcissus in a big public art project. Judith Schechter, who is known as the person of stained glass in the world right now. She just became a treasured artist at the Smithsonian. It was just, they acquired her papers 2 years ago, and now they've named her as a national treasure, which is huge. And Jeff Wallen, this is stained glass, but without the lead lines. So this is very similar techniques to what Judith does. Enamel painting, firing on. He has a very different take. He's a painter by trade or by training. Scaling up and understanding the material, the Lubinskis. I love these pieces. Elena Matekova, Czech. I hadn't heard of her. I found this slide years ago, and I looked her up recently. I couldn't find anything on her, but anyway, this is a beautiful seascape. And then we have Bertil, who did a lot of these heads, but then really expanded his vocabulary to the boats about spirit journeys. And there's Bertil with the biggest one. And Howard Bentray. So if you are talking about casting, when I was coming up through the scene, you got to talk about Bentray, Bertil, and the Lubinskis, because that's who kind of brought it forward more. Karen Lamont, is the body missing? Is it cloaked? Martin Blank, this is not casting, but this is scaled up, called Steam Portrait. And then just some quick slides. This is a performance piece using Corning Rhino glass, which is body armor. And this is a series of slides that I took from very interesting artist, Katja Isabel Filmus, concert level cellist, but also is a glassmaker, is an artist. And this word, omphaloskepsis, means navel gazing, contemplation. Matt Saw's material exploration, inflatables they're called. Justin Ginsberg. And Sharon O'Mara, I love this. This is glass, dog saliva, photo manipulation. What's with the dog saliva? This is so over here is one picture of the dog's nose and tongue and lips on the window waiting for her to come home. And then it's highly manipulated through Photoshop. And the art world at large discovers contemporary glass movement. Josiah McElhaney, Kiki Smith, Robert Rauschenberg. And to me, it became Bob, because I made that broom. And what Robert Rauschenberg taught me in 1997 was you can be as famous can be, and you can still be gracious and welcoming to the world. So I was down delivering this piece, and the warehouse manager said, Bob's expecting you for lunch. So I got to have 2-hour lunch with Bob, my best friend Bob. This is a young artist named Hannah Levy. I was contracted to make this, the glass up top here. It was just a crazy project that Abby helped me with. It was very difficult, but one of the more fun challenges when I finally got it to work. Popular culture. It's here. Blown Away. There's the second year or the first year? First, did she win the first year? And there's Deb. You know, when I saw this on Blown Away, I'm like, what? And I grew to love it. So my path, here we are. As an artist, I think through memory a lot. So this is the church at Penland. So you go up around the corner and it's that old church. When I got there for the first time in 1981, I was studying the flute relatively seriously. I was working on a Bach sonata in A minor. Every day at 5:30, I ducked out of class and went to the church. Every day at dinner, somebody would go, did you guys hear there was somebody playing the flute? And I would just go, But every day at 5:30, the light went through the window. This is 5:30. I took this summer. What I love in terms of my memory as an artist, my brain as an artist, is that on a sunny day on July 15th in 1981, this light would be the same. It would fall exactly in the same place. So my father and mother were both alive when I first went to Penland. In my later visits, they weren't. And I would sit in the pew and weep. Not of the loss, but of the presence. So here I am as a young guy. Penland in 1981, Rhinebeck 1982. I'm the guy with the beard. What's important to say about that is just a year post, you'll see, quitting the theater biz. The theater's coming up. And here's my studio now. If anybody's ever in Rhode Island, you're coming up 95 and 195, give me a holler. I'm 5 minutes off of the highway. I'd love to show you around. It's a beautiful, beautiful studio I was able to build out in 2006 through a set of weird circumstances. So this is my family of origin, my dad and my mom, my brothers and sisters, lower left, my current family, and the beloved dogs who keep us happy. But the important thing about this slide is my father was a manufacturer. I would spend Saturdays going to machine shops, looking at things, how things got done. My dad would come home in his suit with greasy hands, frequently grease on his white shirt. So, and my mom was a museum docent. So I got both sides. My father, World War II, on some, as he would say, a godforsaken island in the Pacific. He was a navigator on bombers. He ended up in Auckland, New Zealand, suffering from malaria. And this is from his scrapbook. He was, on the 30th of August, he was in room 607. So I found myself in Auckland. And I went to the library and said to the kid at the desk, hey, my father was here. And he looks at me like, yeah, what do you want? But the head librarian heard my pitch. And she came over and we went through a non-searchable PDF database, meaning you can't dial in a search, you got to look. And we found this, Hotel Auckland. And I went there. And I was hoping to go up in room 607, but it's now business. It's like a office building. But I did stand right in the middle of the street and just, again, felt the vibe of my dad. Just like, if I looked right at that, there was something he saw too in his frame. My mother, the artistic one, used to schlep us kids off to theater. And I remember 1963, Mary Martin, Peter Pan, the Wilbur Theater. I remember being apoplectic, crazy. I didn't even know what the word apoplectic meant. But we were stage left, up in a box, not a fancy box, but like up in the mezzanine or something. And I could look down where the sets were. And I was like, oh my God. And I saw them buckling her into her flying hardware. And I'm like, this is for me. This is it. This is the world I'm going to inhabit. At the same time, my father would give my mother Steuben objects for anniversaries. I saved these from certain demise. My brother Philip had a big party while my parents were out. And Tony Picocci was standing on the dining room table screaming, help, help, help. And I ran down from typing my paper while this party was going on. And I said, what's up? And he goes, the dog is going to kill me. And as he said that, these things were falling off the dining room table. And look, I remember it as a Spielberg moment. You know, oh, no. But these are in my house now. They were given to me upon the death of my mom. But the theater bug really bit. And I worked on the top, I worked as a rock and roll roadie in the late 70s, early 80s. And that would then pay for lesser paying jobs doing modern dance, straight theater, and opera. All the time as a young lighting designer, technical director. So I get to Penland. This is the slide that shows that's barely 10 months later. From backstage on a light board to this. Perfume bottles were all the rage in the production world and helped me get through RISD. This was my first piece of glass. As an electrician in the theater, you're responsible for anything that has electricity to it. Props came to me and said, we need a light pot, fire pot. In the opening of the second act, the soldiers are going to go like this. And we need it to kind of come up. So I had never done it, but I went and got some glass and somebody's kiln and kiln bricks and took a piece of window glass and slumped it. Now, this slump could have taken just an hour. It took me like 2 days to bring it up to temperature. I kept going, oh, it didn't crack. But I got the concept of it without even taking a class. And then colored it with black and red and put a red light under it, and it worked. I got to RISD in 1983 as a glass blower, and this was all the rage at RISD right then. Italian folds in, out. These are my objects. 1993, handled objects, 18 inches tall, glass and electroplated copper. So that's kiln cast. This is not called reminisci. This is called osterome. Sorry. I gave a lecture down at the Norton in Florida once, and I said, oh, this is a pelvic girdle. And my twin daughters were in the front seat, and they were like, you just didn't say that, please, dear Lord. One of probably my favorite piece I've ever made. Like, this is the one. Kyrgyz is Greek for loom shuttle. So this is a material. We're materialists. This is a material study. Basswood and graphite, bronze, and a piece of glass that was not cast, that was carved out of a little plank of glass. So this is a series of work that addressed protection. They were mainly made in the 90s, but I had a commission to do this in 2016. that same theme, but now just a scientific observation, meniscus. So that glass is about to fill up the basin and spill out. Hollowed arc, we talk about the negative space more than anything else. Lanterns. And this body of work occupied 5 or 6 years of my time. The sentiment here is light doesn't show itself until it's reflecting on something. So if you go up into the attic and there's a knothole missing on the wall and light's coming in, you don't notice it until you blow dust on grandma's picture. And all of a sudden, whatever shape the knothole is projecting. And that's really obviously a studio shot. This is how it's best seen, just with sunlight. None of this is a different color. That's all got to do with light density. And then this is just one shot of a mold, how the molds get built to make those tall pieces. It took us 19 months to go from start to get the first mold through a firing because they were so big, they'd fall apart. And blah, blah, blah. And these are objects for white light that was a museum show at the Mint Museum and then the Museum of Glass. 7 large-scale objects. Here's the jig for those materialists here. This is the assembly jig for this. Suspended channel, which public radio in Charlotte said, why I'm looking at a picture of Mr. Clayman's and it looks like a gutter that I had replaced in my house this week. Empty volume and aperture. And sometimes you get to go to fun parties with your lovely wife. This is at the Corning opening. They acquired circular object number 1. And this was a show I had 2 years ago at the Muskegon Museum of Art, which was kind of a show of outlier pieces. Like the circle, I've made some circles, but I'd never done a real blue. So this is in the studio right now, osteohalo, bone circle. And here's a close-up. Projects. So what's the difference between a project and the object? It's just it's a bigger production. So this is color for Swan Point Cemetery in Rhode Island. Suspended shadows. The idea here is not just the objects are equally as important as the shadows being cast. And from that window, at this scale, we would have windows all the way here. And the sun came around and kind of traveled like that all day. And ever changing. And this is the day we installed them. One is hung and the other one is on its genie hoist. Straight circular object for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. The assignment there was we need a place to encourage community and gathering.
How do you make these circular objects? Are you fuse them together?
They're glued. Oh, and I'm so glad you asked that because at the beginning, I was commenting as we were breaking that piece apart, oh, it's glued. Huh, wow. With good preparation with modern epoxies, your glue joint is stronger than the glass itself. And how do I know that besides that I've read about it? Every time I make a new shape, it's sent off to a destructive testing lab and brought to death. And it always far exceeds anything about the glass. The glue joint never fails.
At what point in the process do you put the glue?
After I've cast all 36 pieces, it usually takes me 60 pieces to get my 32, 36 perfect. And then they're put up on jigs. I don't know if I'm going to get, I don't know where this goes, but here's a good advertisement. On my website, go to the front page, media, all these types of things are on there. This is, so how do I size up? without using glass, I use Architect's yellow trace paper. So this is stainless steel wire pulled, let settle overnight and sag, repulled, a third time repulled, then it's stable, strong, and we just glued these pieces of paper, thousands of pieces of paper, which led me to this. 2016, I was asked to teach a class at Mass Art, and as part of that, they wanted to do the first exhibition in the new Design Media Center. They said, would you teach a class next year surrounding a project? So me and my students made this. That's 10,000 raindrops in a barrel arch called Rainfield. Radiant Landscape came soon after. This is as I saw the building they offered me. This is what it looked like inside the day that I toured. And these are my digital sketches for the proposal. The curator said, are you interested? I said, yeah, I'm interested. He said, I need a proposal 6 weeks from today. Don't be late by an hour. Like if it's past 12:01. And then he wrote me, he says, fantastic. And then wrote me a week later and said, I need a budget 6 weeks from today. Don't be late. And I was thrilled though. That might sound like a little jerky, but he was a super guy. He's used to artists that aren't staying on track. And I'm one who usually does. So here's Radiant Landscape. If we know the color field painters, this also touches on color field painting. And guess which one? Yves Klein. So if you're standing under here in white, it's as blue, your pants are as blue can be. Yves Klein said, in 1924, he said to a friend, I can't find the blue that I want. He's working at an art supply store. So he stole pigments and mixed the blue, what became Yves Klein blue. And here's a nice, in 2013, I was offered a residency at Tyler School of Art, come 1 week a month for the fall. The only requirement was to not make anything I've made before. They gave me a materials budget, housing, food. And then after the second visit, Sharon O'Mara, the department head, said, this is going really well with our students. It's a good mix. Would you consider continuing this until June? So I went to a boulder farm, literally, in Stonington, Connecticut, and we found a boulder, and this is what I made. So these are there's no boulder underneath there. These are skins of glass, 254 parts each. Gold, copper. It's called silver, but it's actually made of white gold, silver Latarba. White gold was nice and warm, and there's the scale with Stella. This is a recent piece I finished for a foundation in New Orleans, and there is a nice 3-minute video, which we don't have time for, but it's on my website. So I became the professor in 2018. University of the Arts came to me and said, would you build us a new glass program? So this is an engraving of UArts on Broad Street, but this is what it looks like now. There's me back blowing glass, which was hysterical. During demos, I would have my friend Michael Shiner on FaceTime and call him and go, I'm trying to stuff this mold and I'm not getting it. And he'd help me through it. And my students were like, you're shameless. And there's our Abby throwing glass in the furnace. Here's the small little studio I walked into. This is the nice studio, and it was going to have a bottom feed glass furnace, which meant we could pour 1,000 pounds of glass at once. But it became obvious they didn't have the resources to build this, but also COVID came. And they shut the whole craft program down during COVID for permanent. But the best part of being at UArts was full-time involvement with my students and administering the Borowski Prize. This is Sarah Brylan and Simone Fieser. I think she's German. Is she German? Crazy work, and we had such an amazing visit with her. Fred Call from Brooklyn. He came in, made all these parts, and we had all these pieces together, and then we opened the kiln up, and somebody had misprogrammed it, and it's all broken. You pour it, it's flat, you spin it, and there you go, it's concave. Temperature and speed give you a different concavity. Cooper O'Brien did a great visit of blowing into waste plaster investment molds. So you can get really weird shapes because you're blowing into these molds, and you blow really hard and it picks up every detail. I show this slide because during teaching, this is a young artist working in porcelain drapery. This is Karen Lamont. She freaked out. This student freaked out when she saw Karen's work. And this is my one graduate, my last graduate, Sam, this is during pandemic. This is graduation morning on Zoom. And then in progress, I'll finish up with this. So I'm working on a federal court commission. This is Federal Arts and Architecture. I am artist, I think 1721, who's gotten a grant from these people, which is pretty good given the length of the country. And so they are adding this on. This is the first iteration, 2017. This is the first lobby they were going to give me. And this is what I was going to do. This is not just the scrim, but the way this is aimed, it amplifies the sky. But Trump's steel tariffs dictated, GSA said, don't start this building, you're 23% over before you broke ground. So it went on hold for 2 years. And this is what I'm doing. These are some digital shots. Okay, so this is what I proposed early on. Architecture was emulating the pediments, blah, blah, blah. And then I got onto this thing as I found a beautiful set of videos of prairie grass blowing in the wind. Prairie grass starts around Toledo. And as you move west, that species really, really becomes something. So taking glass drops that I call lenses and invented a nice, elegant hanger. Here's the ribbon digitally. Okay, so this view, this is what it's supposed to be for 3.5 years. Today, I found out I threatened to quit the job because there were so many problems. So a bunch of stuff happened. But today, we got approval to move it from here to underneath the skylight. And it's going to happen now. I mean, it literally took me writing a letter that said, unless you do this, I'm out. And they acquiesced to everything I asked for, and they said, you're not unreasonable. We've been having problems here. And this is what the ribbon will look like. It's 146 feet long. So I'm not the first person that's done something with glass drops. But this is an expansion of the vision of a lyrical. And so the idea is when you come to a federal court, you are not coming for anything fun. This is not adoption. This is not wedding. This is federal problem. And I didn't want anybody to come out and hit a piece that confronted them in any way. I wanted you to have a moment of, oh my God, Clara, look at that. So they're not, but they're only blue because to show it in the cartoon. And here's the building going up. Here's my work desk. Here's the stringer maker. I'm working still on objects, rocks, and I'm getting, Brown is scanning me a moon rock. So this moon rock is only this big, nothing from the moon was much bigger than this because of weight and size. I'm taking it and we're scanning it, and it's going to be another thing. And it harkens back to my love of being a nerdy space kid. I only put this picture in here because I fool around with digital. There's nothing real about this. And it just cracked me up. And so the last thing I'll leave you with is this piece called Orbital Traces, which talks about stuff floating in space and orbiting the Earth. And again, you can't see it until light's on it. So this is 18 feet in diameter. And this is the inside structure. There's a steel truss inside that's sheathed in glass. And this is the study model. So you're looking at the steel structure with a plastic print of what will be glass. Here's the structure. Here's the model, fully assembled, 6-foot people. The future is now. This is the work I'm working on now. During COVID, I don't know how to say this gently. My COVID was really productive. I taught 10 hours a week from my computer, and then I worked in the studio every day. And every bit of plaster, every time I made something, I would just take it and quickly. So what I'm after at 66 years old is I want to make artwork that's not, everything's planned out and that curve's got to be just right. I want the ideation to be like this. So these are studies. And these are the first iterations this big. The red line is going to be that this is going to be built. I'm going to divide this up, and these are going to be cast, press molded in separate parts. So this object will probably be 8 parts, not like the Boulder's 254 parts. Press molded super thin so the light really works on those objects, on those glass parts. And then these will be red, like the first glass I'm using is red. And the glue I use to hold them together is filled with 24 karat gold powder. And so then you take this form and grind back the seam, and you're left with a filigree of gold. And I've done some testing. Trust me, it's going to look great. And talk about future first. This is the new project that I hope I'm working on. I had my first meeting. Everything's good. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it's a research company in Boston, biomedical research company. They're building a new headquarters. And they saw my work somewhere, called me out of the blue and said, I went and visited and said, yeah, I'll take the atrium. I love the atrium. So I think that's it.